The old woman does not raise her voice. She does not need to. Out here, where the wind carries voices for miles and the dark stretches longer than memory, a whisper travels just as far as a scream, and it lingers in the blood far longer. Before you cross, she says to the traveler kneeling at her fire, you must learn what walks beside you when the sun disappears. She does not begin with names. She begins with warnings, and the traveler, wise enough to be afraid, listens. The first warning is this: not everything that smiles means you well. Somewhere out in the white distance, a thin, gaunt figure waits with wild hair and nails grown long as knives. The Mahaha, the Inuit spirit whose laughter reaches you before its face ever does. It does not strike with claws or teeth. It tickles its victims until their hearts give out beneath that terrible fixed grin, leaving them frozen mid-law in the snow, a smile carved onto a corpse. Further south, across dark water, a different deceiver waits inside the storm itself. The Yuki-onna, a woman of impossible, breathless beauty, hair as black as her kimono is white as untouched snow. She leads lost travelers deeper into the blizzard, with a voice soft as falling flakes, and her breath alone can still a beating heart before the cold even finishes the job. Nearer to shore, children are taught to fear the hum that rises from the tide, the kalupalik, green-skinned and long-haired, who waits at the water's edge for a child who has wandered too far from watching eyes. And should you ever meet a relative on the trail who seems somehow wrong, too still, too eager to lead you off the marked path, you may be looking at the Ijirak, a shapeshifter that borrows familiar faces to walk the unwary into nowhere. The elder's lesson is simple, and she repeats it like a stone worn smooth by handling. In the deep cold, trust is the first thing you lose, and it should be the very last thing you give away. The second warning cuts deeper because it begins with something the traveler already understands in his own bones: hunger. There is a curse, she says, that does not arrive from outside a person, but grows from within. When starvation finally drives someone to break the oldest taboo of all, cross that line, and you do not come back as yourself. You become the Wendigo, a towering, skeletal thing crowned with antlers like a deer, a hunger no feast could ever satisfy. Its scream carried for miles through the black trees, its rotting scent announcing its approach long before its shape ever does. Among tribes further east, this same fall from grace wears another name, the Chanu, a being whose very heart turns to ice as its humanity is consumed piece by greed and gluttony until nothing human remains to plead for mercy. Hunger is not the only door into ruin though. Beneath the frozen mounds where the Norse once buried their dead, something else stirs and will not rest. The Draugr, a corpse that refuses to release what it owned in life, swelling larger and stronger with every trespasser bold enough to disturb its grave. Even magic itself can be twisted into a blade. Shamans of the far north once built the Tupilak from bone and hide and pure malice, breathing purpose into it and sending it into the sea to hunt down a single chosen enemy. Proof that revenge, however righteous it feels in the hour it is summoned, rarely stays only in the hands that called it forth. And there are those who choose their own exile long before any curse forces it on them. The Kivitok, hunters and shamans, who wander into the mountains alone seeking power, only to be hollowed out by isolation until they can no longer be trusted among the people they once knew. But the elder does not end her telling on despair. Her third warning carries a different weight, almost reverence. Not everything that lives in the ice wishes you harm. Some things simply are the ice, vast and indifferent, and they ask nothing of you but respect. The Jotnar of Norse legend are not villains waiting to be slain. They are the mountains and glaciers given form and breath, older than the gods themselves, bound as often to marriage and alliance as to war. Out on the black water, the Nanorluk moves like an idea too large for the mind to hold, a bear beyond any bear, crushing ice and stone as if they were nothing, a living reminder that some forces were never meant to be tamed, only endured. The lone wolf of the tundra, the Amarok, hunts the traveler who walks without kin beside him, not out of cruelty, but as if to underline a truth every elder already knows. This world was never built for anyone to survive alone. Along the coasts, the Aklet slips as easily through water as across land, part wolf and part orca, embodying the one lesson the Arctic never lets anyone forget, that survival here means belonging to two worlds at once, not clinging stubbornly to one. High above the mountains, where storms are born rather than merely endured, Kuraukami coils through the clouds as a dragon of rain and snow, older than memory, watched over not with fear but with gratitude, for the harvest itself depends on its favor. By the time the fire burns low and the sky begins to pale at its edges, the traveler understands what the old woman was truly teaching him all along. Every people who ever faced true winter, Inuit, Norse, Japanese, Algonquian, arrived at the same conclusion through entirely different tongues. The cold does not punish the reckless out of cruelty. It punishes them because it must, because it has no room left for carelessness and no patience left for greed. Perhaps that is why these old warnings still matter. Long after the last hunters traded ice for asphalt and firelight for streetlight, we still meet our own Mahahas, faces that smile while meaning us harm. We still risk becoming our own Wendigos, hollowed out by wanting more than we could ever need. And we still need someone, an elder, a story, a fire in the dark, to show us exactly where that line sits before we cross it without even noticing we have. So if you ever find yourself at the edge of something vast and unforgiving, in ice or in ordinary life, remember the old woman's fire and the warnings she carried forward so that someone else would never have to learn them the hard way. If this journey through winter's older legends stayed with you, stay with us a little longer. Subscribe and tell us which frozen tale from around the world deserves to be carried into the light next.